Singapore is set to raise the standard of foreign worker dormitories. Plans have been outlined for 11 new dorms to reduce accommodation density. Some will be located near residential areas. The government also says 40,000 migrant workers have been cleared of infection the day before restrictions start to lift at the end of the circuit breaker. Tan Si Hui joins us live right now. So Si Hui, what's the plan for these dormitories?
So changes are going to be made to the specifications and the way they are managed as part of what's been described a continual process to lift standards. It's also part of the response to the huge infection numbers in these settings, which have now largely stabilized. And so for the short to medium term, the aim is to transit workers out of these crowded dorms.
Well, I'm afraid we have lost Si Hui there, but we'll try and bring her to you maybe a little bit later on in the show. Well, from tomorrow, everyone will be required to wear face masks to protect against the coronavirus, with face shields only allowed in specific scenarios. The government says the design of face shields typically leaves gaps between the shield and the face. It says this isn't ideal with more activities and closer contact among people expected as the economy restarts. Face masks will be the mandatory default option except in certain cases. These include for children 12 and below who may find it difficult keeping a face mask on for a prolonged time, and for those who speak to a group in a class or lecture-style setting. That's because they're able to maintain safe distancing. Also exempted, people with health conditions that cause breathing difficulties.
We will continue to exercise flexibility in the enforcement for groups that may have difficulties wearing face masks. Even as the circuit breaker ends, we appeal to everyone to continue to stay at home and avoid going out except for essential services, as well as to buy essential items, or to work where telecommuting is not possible.
All of the 408 new COVID-19 cases reported today are work pass holders living in foreign worker dormitories. There were no new cases in the community. The national total is now close to 35,300. Well, Singapore is preparing to reopen after 8 weeks under circuit breaker restrictions. From tomorrow, activities that are essential will be allowed to restart under the first phase of reopening. A gradual approach has been adopted to stop a second wave of infections. And here's what to expect. About 3/4 of the economy will reopen, and this includes most of the critical manufacturing sector, including con and pharmaceutical facilities. And on the consumer side, hair salons will finally be able to offer more than just a basic haircut. Vehicle and aircon servicing plus certain pet services can also resume. Working from home is still the preferred default for companies that can accommodate it. Next, schools at all levels will also reopen, but there are conditions. Some students will have to alternate between being physically in the classroom and learning from home so as to thin out cohorts. For some preschool and special education students, their return will be staggered. For those who need medical attention, more services will be available. For example, you'll be able to see a specialist or undergo certain kinds of surgery that your doctor thinks you need. Screening for some diseases and preventive health services like receiving a flu shot will also return. If you want to get your teeth fixed, you must have an appointment. People can begin visiting parents or grandparents, but it's limited to a visit a day, with a maximum of 2 guests from the same household each time. Marriage solemnizations, funerals, and wakes can also resume as long as there are no more than 10 people in attendance. Places of worship can reopen, but there will be no large congregations. Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong says dealing with COVID-19 is a marathon, not a sprint. He's urged the public to keep their guard up to prevent another spike in cases, even as the circuit breaker is lifted. And that means carrying on with safe distancing measures such as avoiding crowds and wearing masks. He's cautioned that the coronavirus is far from defeated, despite daily community cases coming down. Mr. Lee says things will not simply go back to the status quo even after a vaccine is found, adding the virus has exposed how vulnerable our way of life is. Still, the pandemic has given the opportunity for the country to prove its mettle and come back stronger. Mr. Lee has thanked all for playing their part in allowing Singapore to reopen safely, urging people not to let up on their efforts so that the sacrifices of others would not be in vain. Safe distancing stickers on public transport will start to be removed from tomorrow to free up more space on trains and buses. The move comes as more people return to their workplaces. The Transport Ministry says it will be challenging to maintain safe distancing, especially during peak hour. It's encouraging flexible work arrangements and says commuters must play their part.
From 2nd June, public transport frequency and operating hours will return to pre-circuit breaker levels. However, even at full capacity, the Transport Ministry and Land Transport Authority say maintaining safe distancing on trains and buses will be difficult. That's because about a third of workers will be able to go back to their workplaces.
Now, in order to carry enough people, we're going to have to remove the stickers and allow people to sit there. But we will have our transport ambassadors. They've been out on the ground and helping people already. They will continue that work to help people behave better. What does behaving better mean? Keep your mask on. Please don't talk. Because those are things that we can do to prevent risk to other commuters.
LTA says seat markers on train platforms will also be removed. The same goes for boarding queue markers at bus interchanges. To ease the squeeze during peak hour, Dr. Janil hopes employers will encourage telecommuting or allow staggered hours where possible. Rigorous cleaning regimes on public transport will continue. High contact surfaces will be sprayed with self-disinfecting coating. As an added precaution, commuters can also use safe entry, which will help with contact tracing efforts where needed. This will be entirely voluntary.
The use of safe entry is not going to delay your travel because no one's going to stop you to check your NRIC. This is something that while you're waiting for the train, waiting for the next train to come along, the QR code is there. Please use it so that you have a log and you can be protected.
Meanwhile, when asked if transport fares may rise due to higher long-term operating costs and low passenger demand during the circuit breaker, Dr. Janil says it's too early to tell.
As we go through this reopening of the economy, we will have to maintain the cleanliness and effectiveness of the public transport system. And as we do that, we'll see what happens to passenger loads, and we'll see what happens to the operations. And after we are very clear that we've achieved some kind of steady state, that's the time to then review this. But for now, we do what's necessary to keep Singapore moving.
Transport Minister Khaw Boon Wan had previously said that if the impact is drastic, the government may need to update the financing model for public transport appropriately.